I mean, we're talking about ourselves here, so I don't know how many people are really going to watch these episodes, but whatever. People need to know who we are because we're doing this.
So, for people who don't know, how long have you been watching wrestling?
Oh man, the best answer to that question is all my life. But from when I can remember, we're going to say about 5 years old. So since about 86 would be 4 and some change, I guess. Yeah, you can say about 86 because I mean, like I said, I mean, some of the matches I remember most are from the end of the 80s. But yeah, so yeah, been watching wrestling a long time. My dad is the reason that I started watching wrestling because I watched it with him and just all the characters being over the top back then. I really gravitated towards them. All the face paint guys being my favorite across the board. I liked everyone that was a character. When we were talking to Caleb Conley, he had mentioned Great Muta scaring him just by the way he looked. And I totally understand that and agree because he was so mysterious. He would come to the ring and he had a specific style with the way he came. He always had the best entrance gear too, like over the top outfits that he would then end up taking off and insanely fast and full face paint and wouldn't speak. So he just had this whole mysterious vibe to him that on TV was awesome. But yeah, in person, I was like, I don't know if I want to meet Great Muta. Like he's got that scary look to him. So like, yeah. So as a kid, it was like that. But then the bigger guys, like, I mean, Sting was, blonde haired when I watched him. Spikes, really like, twice the size he is now. Color, all the color. He was all colorful. So he was a very inviting, face paint guy. And then my guys like the Road Warriors, which they were just brutes. They were just dominating everyone in the ring, and they also did the whole face paint. I took more to Animal being a big dude, and then also even as a kid, I was a chunkier kid. I liked Animal because he was broad and wide and full face paint, where like Hawk was the taller, stronger, just muscular, tall guy, and he had partial face paint. So. Yeah. But yeah, those guys were my guys, big time, big fans of them. But yeah, so when it comes to wrestling, like I said, I would estimate it at 30, let's say 35 years I've been watching wrestling.
Nice.
Long time.
Do you have a bad travel story?
All right. So I've done a lot of road traveling in my time being from jobs and everything else, even like being when I was a Time Warner technician, having gotten stuck in a ditch in a half-ton van. Yeah, that was pretty crappy. But I do actually have a bad wrestling road story. And it's actually a fairly short road story, but it's the worst story I have. It was last year around summertime. I was going to go to ASW. My kid had a soccer match in Greensboro, North Carolina. So I was actually going to miss the soccer match, which isn't the biggest deal because the kid has like 13 to 14 matches a year, and I go to pretty much all of them. So he was okay with me missing one. He was actually more upset at the fact that he wasn't going to the wrestling match with me. He was like, I love playing soccer, but I love going to wrestling. I hate that I'm going to miss this one. And yeah, but he's a trooper. He's my little guy. He's 8. So his name's Roman. So Rome was like, all right, that's cool. Dad and brother are going to go see wrestling. My big thing about this one was I was going to meet Ethan Page for the first time. I had a Venom or a symbiote suit Spider-Man bust that I was going to give him, meet him, talk to him. I liked the fact that I was going to meet him there because ASW, they do a great job. All the wrestlers are set up around the ring, around the outside. They all have their own tables. And because it's a big event, I would call it a medium-sized event. It's not going to be 10,000 people. It's going to be several hundred. And the time that you get to spend talking to the wrestlers is as long as they'll talk to you. Of course, you give them their respect. You're not going to sit there and talk to them the whole time. They're there to do a job. They're there to make their money. So anyway, drove to Greensboro. my car was showing no signs of issues. It was doing its job, doing its thing. And we drove there. I pulled up, checking my wife and my kid into the hotel. I put the car in park, and it kept driving forward. And I was like,
oh no.
Yeah, what is going on here? So, mind you, I have front row tickets to this show that I coordinated because I don't live in West Virginia. The promoter of that show was super awesome and let me send him money, and he bought my tickets on my behalf. Can't beat that.
Wow.
Much respect to that dude. I want to say his name is Gary. I know his first name is Gary, and I cannot remember his last name, so I'm not even going to try to butcher that. But Gary's amazing, and I think everyone of West Virginia and surrounding areas should support ASW if you're a wrestling fan. So I'm sitting on front row seats to this show, and my car decides it doesn't want to go into any gear but drive.
Oh,
So being that I needed to get my kid and wife checked in, I shifted the gear back into park, which it wasn't doing anything at all. I shut the car off. I was like, you know what? If I shut the car off, put my parking brake on, it's not going to move. Got in, checked the kids in. I was like, all right, let's try to take a look at this car. I have very minimal knowledge of taking care of a car. I can change my own oil. I can change my tires. I can pump my gas. So like usually, when you're shifting your gears, it's like click, click, click. There's nothing. I can run it up and down with a single finger. And I'm like, all right, something's messed up. Call for a tow truck to take it to my dad's house. My dad is a much better mechanic. We also have a couple of mechanic friends. Well, the tow truck doesn't arrive until this was 7 p.m. that I called. The tow truck arrived at 2 a.m.
Oh, no.
At that point, I'm thinking to myself, I might need a new transmission. So by the time I boil down to it and 2 a.m. comes around, I've had about 5 or 6 beers by this time because I'm not happy.
Yeah.
I know I'm not driving anywhere. I'm staying at the hotel I'm at. And I had a couple of options. I could have borrowed my mom's car. I could have borrowed my dad's car. My brother was willing to offer me his car. In the back of my head, I was like, I need a new transmission. Thankfully, the issue was some little pin fell out of the gear shift. So we ended up just having to connect the gear shift back together. Literally cost me like $5 and a case of beer to the dude that fixed my car. Shout out to him. So
couldn't have been better.
Yeah. So I was playing the adult card and said, don't spend any extra money. You may have to dip into your savings to fix your car. One of those times where I wish I was a single guy and I've been like, fuck it. I'm going to go to this show and I'll fix it later. But no, I had to be a dad, I had to be a husband. I had to think of my family. So
can't be like consequences. What are those?
Exactly. That's for later they need to take care of. Fuck that guy. Like, that has to wrap up my bad road story for the fact that I missed meeting Ethan Page. And then the shining light on that is that you and I went to WrestleCade that year. And on top of meeting Ethan Page, we met Scorpio Sky, who was a riot. That's my bad road story. And with going with our normal format, I will just jump into my good road story. My good road story, I have many, but the only one that comes to mind and will always come to mind, my good road story is going to California to go to the FTR with Dax live podcast, the one and only one that happened. And that was a big shout out to my wife for letting me drop a bunch of money to take a trip from North Carolina to California. Babe, I've been thinking about this hard and I really want to do this. And I originally said no. And then Dax and Matt Coon just kept stacking the card. This person's going to be on there. And, Cash is going to be there. And Wardlow's going to be there. And Hobbs is going to be there. Sean Spears. And I'm like, this is one of those events where if I miss it, I'm going to hate myself. So
I get that.
She understood. Yeah, she understood. The place that I stayed at was like 100 and some change. And it was cool because there was a couple of the indie wrestlers that stayed in the same hotel as me that I ran into. So
nice.
I thought that was pretty awesome. Yeah. Decent location. I was around the corner from the hotel that they had it at. And so WrestleCon was going on. Humongous wrestling event that I hope one day you and I get to go to.
Mm-hmm.
In the interim, I literally went there just for Dax and Cash and the rest of the team that was doing the show. I went and saw an indie show It was kind of cool. I got to speak to Effie. I bought Allie a drink because they didn't take cash at the bar. And she was like, "Are you buying a drink?" And I was like, "Yes." And she's like, "Buy me a drink." And she hands me cash. And I'm like, "How about I just buy you a drink?" I was like, "Take your cash back." Yeah. So went to the event. I got there. I got a front row seat to the actual show. Saw everybody. And then afterwards, the best part of that was we all got to drink tequila with Dax and Cash and FT, with Sean Spears and Wardlow. They all hung out. They hung around. They met everyone. They signed autographs. They took pictures. I gave Wardlow the shirt that you saw me that had a WrestleCade. I had one made for him. That was the Wardlow's World where he was done in Bobby's World.
Yeah.
So gave him that. He loved it. Sean Spears, super awesome dude. So nice to meet him. He's like so well-spoken and soft-spoken, unlike the dude we see on TV, right? He's like the total opposite of his character, which is great. And then the icing on the cake for that event was being the fact that I've met Dax several times, and special shout out to Zane Dawson for like tweeting at Dax, letting him know that, we have a good rapport. Dax and Zane being great friends, and Dax already having a rapport with me. Dax was like, "Hey, let's go have a drink." And I think the best thing was the event was totally over. Cash goes to his room. Everyone goes to their room. Dax goes to the bar with me and endures all the idiots in the place just to have a drink with me. I could have cried later that day, but I was too drunk to do that. I had my drink with Dax, and then Matt Coon came down afterwards, and I probably talked to Matt. We had a beer together, and we talked for, it had to be like 30 to 45 minutes, just bullshitting about podcasts, a little bit of inspiration out to him for us doing this podcast. I had mentioned not this specific idea, but just the idea of doing a podcast in general. And, he was telling me he was a one-man show for him and Dax. Like, he did all the clip work and did everything and put all the video together. And I was like, well, if one dude can do it, I was like, me and my buddy can definitely pull this off. And it was all about trying to land the concept, right? So really excited about our concept. Like I said, I bounced it off of several wrestlers. After me and Matt wrap up, Matt's going back to his room. I call my Uber. I get to my hotel room and I'm like, I cannot go to bed like this. I need to eat before I go to bed or I'm done. That didn't happen. I fell asleep while eating. Haven't been that sloppy. I don't know, maybe since my wedding. So 2006, for those keeping count of how long ago that would have been. Experience of a lifetime. To talk about when I was having that drink with Dax, Mercedes Moné walks up in street clothes, talks to Dax. I'm literally having a conversation with her. No clue that that's who I was talking to. If she would have even been like, she was wearing glasses. I'm pretty sure she was wearing glasses, but they were just regular, look like prescription glasses, not flashy shades. So, hair not done, normal person. I just assumed that her and Dax were friends and they were talking. And it took me the following morning thinking about that night that I was like, did I really have a whole conversation with Mercedes and didn't tell her anything about how awesome I think she is or how talented she is and how excited that I get when I see her like doing these kick-ass matches? I was like, damn, talk about a missed opportunity. So big bucket list item for Danny, meet Mercedes and tell her that. I totally talked to you while completely hammered and had no clue who you were until the next day when I was like sober and recollected the day before. That I would say that wraps up my Good Road story.
Who was your first favorite wrestler?
So that's a good one because it spans a couple of dudes. Like, I'm one to never narrow down to a single individual. Like, even when it comes to my comedians, I have a top 5 and I don't like any one of them more than the other. But when it came to my wrestlers, I know that we like the individual answers. So I thought hard about it, and there are several that come to mind. Sting and the Road Warriors and Ultimate Warrior top that list. But when it came down to it, It's actually Bret Hart. Can it be? It's not actually Bret. It's actually Anvil. So it's the Hart Foundation that drew me in as a kid a lot. Even though they're not face paint guys, I really enjoyed them. Again, I always go back to the statement of I like my big guys, and Anvil was the brute of that team, and I related to him more. I liked watching Hitman wrestle more, but Anvil was my dude. I always enjoyed when he was in the ring. He was always the heavier guy for the finish. He would hold the person up for the heart attack. He would just always pull off the powerhouse moves where Bret was always the more technical guy. So Anvil is where I land. The close second to those guys and to my face paint guys is Bam Bam Bigelow. And Bam Bam, because he was an agile big dude. I mean, the guy cut cartwheels in the ring. Like, he was the reason I attempted cartwheels as a kid. So, like, I will always have, even though I'm working on myself and I'm working towards trying to be a smaller guy, I will always have the love and respect for my big guy wrestlers. Like right now, like JD Drake, Bojack. I love those guys. I love watching them. And even on my women's side, like Willow. Willow's my girl, man. Like, I love watching her pounce anybody. Yeah. Like, that's one of my moves. So yeah, so Anvil first.
And who's your current favorite wrestler?
My current, there's no shortage of me talking about Dax. Like, on Dax, it comes to multiple levels. I've spoken to him on a personal level. Him being as personal as he is online and with what he says has helped me personally as well. Like, there's a lot of time in my life where, I mean, my friends love me and they've always loved me for who I am. And I would not go to events that I was invited to because of anxiety. Even getting on the plane to go see Dax live, I was sitting in the airport doubting taking the flight because of things like that. And I was like, Dax wouldn't want that shit. I don't want that shit. I want to go. But in the back of my mind, that little guy is always there saying, do you really want to do this? Are you important enough to go do this? Like, that's a question I always, I don't know why I feel like there should be some kind of level of importance in my head of why I'm doing this, or do I deserve to do this? And I mean, I've worked hard for everything I own. I do deserve it, but it's one of those things where I always question it. So like, and because of that, Dax holds a different level to me than a lot of other wrestlers. So that makes him my current favorite. But when it comes to the other aspect of this as well, so hands down, the answer to this question is Dax. But Brian Cage is a monster and an agile monster that, and him and Wardlow hold a very high rank to me as well, performance-wise, just how amazing they are and how athletic they are. And for those two guys to be pulling off like Jeff Hardy style moves, luchador moves, I love it. Like they take it. So performance wise, I would go with them. But overall, if I had to choose one favorite, it's going to be Dax Harwood, hands down, just because of how great of a person he is, not just in the ring, but outside of the ring.
When you're traveling, where do you like to go eat?
Oh man. So it's not known, of course, because I'm not a big social media presence, but I had bariatric surgery back in 2020. So that changes my answer dramatically. Pre-surgery, it was any local place that has the best burger. I love burgers a lot, and I'm a foodie, I guess you would say, in the fact that I don't want to go to the chain. I will take the best local spots you have. So I would ask either my Uber driver or whoever's local in the show. I'll ask the fan sitting next to me, if they're from here, where do you go? Fast option though, if I go somewhere and there isn't, give you a great example like Beckley. When you get out of Beckley, nothing's open. There's one bar open, and I travel with my kids as much as I can, so I'm not going to the bar. So I end up at a Sheetz or at a Waffle House because that's what's open. But yeah, now pre or post surgery, I eat a little more healthy in that respect. I'll still have a burger every once in a while, but the burger is off the bun. It's just with the lettuce, tomato, onions, and whatever, ketchup, mustard, or whatever I'm eating on it. So I'm not as big into getting a burger as I used to be. So now it's like, who has the best steak? Usually on more of like the filet mignon side, I'll get like a 6-ouncer and call it a day. So yeah, so I'm a big steak guy. I will go anywhere to get a steak. If I can get to a good spot, it's usually going to cost me, right? Like, let's say we're here in Charlotte. If I'm eating filet, I can't go rare just because my body won't allow it. So I usually go medium rare or medium. I usually tell them medium because it ends up coming out medium rare. Like
Same. I do the same thing. I totally get that. Like, there's something about just like a good steak.
If I could, honestly, when I'm on the road, if I could just find the nearest Japanese steakhouse, that would be where I'd go, hands down. I'd be bringing home a lot of food, but I'd eat all my steak before I left. I know that.
Yeah.
My priority is a Japanese steakhouse, but if not, I will fall back to any Sheetz or Waffle House and just order whatever I can protein-wise. Oh, yeah. My Waffle House order hasn't changed in 20 years. You can go back to when we were in high school, and my order is always a 3-egg omelet with hash browns scattered covered. That's it. That's what I'm gonna get. Like, but now I'm gonna order that, and I'm gonna eat a quarter of it, and then I'm gonna eat the other, like, or maybe half, because I'm going to Waffle House. I've been drinking, so I'll probably take down half of it, and then the other half will get eaten for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
So
it's solid. I get that. The last one would be, if you could only watch one wrestling match for the rest of your life,
right.
What match would that be?
Yeah. So I've been talking to you about this for a while, and originally when we were coming up with these questions, I was like, I thought off the cuff, right? So that's why when we do this question, we give this to our interviewer early. Or interviewee, I guess we should say, right? We give them this question off the bat so they have time to think about it, because when you and I were coming up with this, I thought, and within minutes, I came up to one of the last matches I saw, which is an amazing match, which is the dog collar match between FTR and the Briscoes. I initially chose that match. One, it was still a little fresh to me, but it was also one of those few matches where I'm watching the match, and in my own home, I'm getting out of my chair. It causes me to pace a little bit. It causes me to yell at my TV. And those are the kind of matches that I think about when I think of, if I can only watch one, it's got to be something like this that runs me through emotions, that runs me through every emotion. And then, of course, with the unfortunate passing of Jay, there's that extra emotion that I get when I watch it now. Like, just thinking about it, it's causing me to like want to cry. So
same.
Yeah. So and then, again, that little personal touch that you and I have with those guys, we've met both of those guys, and Mark and Jay complimented me personally, and that meant the world to me. Matches like that hold my attention a lot. But after thinking about, like I said, 35 years of wrestling, I was like, I got to take this back. I'm like, I'm sure there's other matches that touch that I think about a lot. And what comes to mind is War Games. And I'm not talking about the War Games we have now, which the original War Games, which was back in 87, the first one was amazing because it was the Road Warriors, Nikita Koloff, Dusty, and Paul. So again, Road Warriors, which Paul Ellering, he was their guy. So there's the 5 of them against the 4 Horsemen and JJ Dillon, who was essentially kind of managing and fighting with the Horsemen. It was them, and it was an amazing match. But I personally liked their second War Games match, which I want to say it was called Explosion or something. It was great. It was the Great American Bash, 1987. It was July 31st, and it was again the Superpowers and the Road Warriors against the Horsemen. And they had War Machine was his name, and it was just a masked Big Boss Man. And so The War Games format hasn't changed. It's exactly how it is now. You have 2 wrestlers in the ring. Back then, there wasn't an advantage match like there is now, like how, there's a match before War Games with the winner of that match, their team gets the advantage. It was a coin toss. And again, I mean, the coin toss could have been rigged for all I know. I was 5 years old. What do I know? I thought the coin toss was real, and it could have been for all we know. But just knowing the way the match went on and the guys who went in first and second, like, they have the hold it down. And I want to say it was like Arn Anderson and Dusty Rhodes that started the match. So they're like in there and they're brawling for like 5 minutes before anyone else comes in. And in typical fashion, the heels get the advantage. So the match goes on for a while. And like the parts that really stick out to me, of course, are towards the end. Like, I want to say Hawk was the 4th man to enter, and he came in like a bat out of hell. It was like a hot tag when he came in, and he just ripped through everybody. I mean, he hit everybody on the way in through the second ring. They were throwing guys. Him and Animal were throwing guys from the first ring over both ropes into the second ring. After he does his part, I want to say Luger might have been the final man for the Horsemen to come in. He comes in, does his thing, and then again, Ellering comes in, and by the time everyone's in the ring, that's when War Games begins, right? So now it's either pin or submit. And Paul Ellering comes in, and he's got a spiked, like, wrist strap. So he's, like, coming in and, like, nailing everybody with the spikes. Flair's bleeding everywhere because that's what Flair does in a cage match. He's bleeding all over the place. And they end up teaming up. The Road Warriors end up teaming up pretty good on War Machine. And then by the end of the match, they got War Machine down, and Animal is just on top of War, like top guard position on War Machine, just driving the spiked bracelet into his face. So he's wearing a mask. So like the commentary, by the way, Tony Schiavone is one of the commentary guys, so loving it. And he's yelling about Animal driving the spikes into his eyes, but it's not really. It's kind of like above the forehead, not really into the mask. But he's sitting there for what feels like, I don't know, it's a good 3 minutes of him just continuously driving these spikes into his face until they give up. I want to say the victory was actually not caused by a tap out or anything. It just caused for War Machine just laying there like limp, like he wasn't moving. Because I don't remember hearing anybody calling for, I mean, I guess J.J. Dillon could have been on the outside and he could have like threw the flag in on it. Because JJ didn't fight that one. I'm going to assume JJ probably got hurt during the war games that happened literally 30 days before the one that happened. So, like, they did one at the beginning of the month and one at the end of the month. And that was the first 2 War Games. But I'm going to say that match was – that's got to be the one. I mean, it's like a 25-minute match. And it's just great from beginning to end because you have a lot of good wrestling in the beginning with Dusty and Arn just – going at it, and then the guys involved. I mean, Luger, Flair, Tully. Like seeing Tully and Arn in there, like prime, like, and Dusty, man. Like Dusty's always just been amazing. And then like Paul Ellering, seeing him as buff as he was back then, because like when I think of Paul Ellering, a lot that comes to mind is him and the Road Warriors when they were the Legion of Doom. So him coming out in his suit, and he's a little smaller, and he's got his wrapped up paper, and he's just coming out being a badass manager. But seeing him in the ring is just awesome too, though, because like I forgot how large he actually was. If I was a manager, I want to be a Paul Ellering. Like, I mean, Heyman's amazing. I will always say that Heyman's a great outside like manager. He's good for catching heat. He's good on the mic, but there was just something about Paul and his presence. Like that's what he was to me, was a presence that even though he didn't take away from his guys in the ring, I looked at him often when he was doing his thing. So
awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. I'll have to add it to the list.
Yeah. All right. So that was me.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, wrestling fan forever. I'm introducing it to my kids. I plan on having them take it on. After our last event, I had asked them that if I wasn't taking them to an event and they had the option to go, would they? And they were like, oh yeah, like we're going to be going to wrestling for a long time. So I do hope that this is what keeps my kids hanging out with old dad, you know, like well into their 20s and 30s. Like I hope that they do for me what I'm doing for my dad. I mean, my dad's in his 70s, and we drag him to every show and he loves it. And I just hope that it's a memory. I know it's a memory for us and my kids, and they're getting extra time with granddad, but I hope that it hits him as well. So, but yeah,
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does.
I had mentioned my kids several times throughout my stuff because they're a big part of my life, and they're one of the reasons why I dragged them to these shows, is so I have something in common with them to hang out with them on. We also do an unboxing channel because my kids are big nerds like I am. So we get stuff like Geek Fuel and Legos and things of that nature, and I do the unboxing channel with them so I can hold on to the sliver of time I have left with them before dad's not cool anymore. So if you are into things like Legos and Marvel and pop figures and also our wrestling boxes, because we do also do like the pro wrestling crates and the AEW crate, check us out. It is Unbox Docs, all one word. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and of course YouTube, and it's just at Unbox Docs. I was able to coin the name across the whole thing, so give us a shout.